If you had to pick one main character in the sprawling epic story of the Mediterranean, it would have to be the sea itself. It's the stage where empires rose and fell, where fortunes were made and lost, and where the fates of nations were decided by cannon, oar, and sheer force of will. For centuries, two titans wrestled for control of this stage: the Republic of Venice, the ancient maritime power, and the Ottoman Empire, a young, hungry force expanding with terrifying speed. Their rivalry was a clash of worlds, a 300-year contest of commerce and faith. Now, when you think of this rivalry, your mind probably jumps to the huge fleet battles of the 16th century, like the famous Battle of Lepanto. But the seeds of those conflicts were planted much earlier, in a battle that's often overlooked but is arguably just as important. We're going back to the early 15th century. Venice was a mature but still formidable giant of the sea. The Ottomans were a rising land empire, just starting to figure out this whole navy thing. In 1416, off the coast of Gallipoli, their ambitions collided. This is the story of how a determined Venetian fleet sailed into the heart of Ottoman naval power, and how the battle that followed, the first major naval showdown between Venice and the Ottomans, set the stage for centuries of war. So, how did we get here? How did Venetian and Ottoman ships end up in a fight to the death in the Dardanelles? To get that, we need to rewind and look at the years of simmering tension. The early 1400s were a time of massive change. The Republic of Venice, La Serenissima, was at the peak of its power, but it was a fragile power. Its wealth didn't come from land, but from its maritime empire, the Stato de Mar, the state of the sea. This was a network of forts, islands, and trading posts stretching from the Adriatic all the way to the Black Sea. Trade was Venice's lifeblood. Spices, silk, grain, you name it, it flowed through Venetian ports, all protected by a navy that was the envy of Christendom. The arsenal of Venice was an industrial marvel, capable of rapidly outfitting war galleys with remarkable efficiency. This naval muscle allowed Venice to enforce its monopolies and protect its merchants, making the Republic fabulously rich. But this dominance didn't go unchallenged. For decades, Venice's main rival was Genoa, another Italian sea power. By the early 15th century, though, a much more dangerous power was rising in the east. The Ottoman Empire had spent the 1300s relentlessly expanding across Anatolia and into the Balkans. They were a land-based military machine. But then, disaster struck. In 1402, at the Battle of Ankara, the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I was defeated and captured by the conqueror Timur. This defeat plunged the Ottoman state into a decade-long civil war as Bayezid's sons tore each other apart for the throne. For a moment, it seemed like the Ottoman threat had passed. The Christian powers, Venice included, breathed a collective sigh of relief. But by 1413, one son, Mehmed won. He was a skilled leader known as the Restorer, and his first job was to pull his fractured empire back together. Part of that meant building a navy. The Ottomans knew that to control the sea lanes connecting their lands in Europe and Asia, and to challenge the Christian powers, they needed a fleet. Their main naval base was at Gallipoli, a port city that was the key to the Dardanelles Strait. It was not only the main crossing point for Ottoman armies into Europe, but also a haven for raiders who preyed on Christian shipping. It was these raids that finally lit the fuse. In late 1415, Ottoman ships started hitting Venetian territories and merchant vessels in the Aegean. This wasn't just random piracy, it was a direct challenge to Venice's authority and its bottom line. The Venetian Senate couldn't let this go. A response was needed, but it had to be smart. An all-out war with the newly reunified Ottoman Empire was a terrifying thought. So, Venice went with a classic strategy: coercive diplomacy. In the spring of 1416, a Venetian squadron set sail. Officially, its mission was diplomatic, to carry envoys to negotiate with Sultan Mehmed I. But this was a diplomatic mission with a big stick. The fleet's commander, Pietro Loredan, had clear orders. If the Ottomans refused to talk or kept attacking, he was authorized to destroy their fleet. Pietro Loredan was the embodiment of Venice's naval might. Born in 1372 to a noble family of admirals, he was a seasoned, battle-hardened commander. The Senate trusted him completely. His fleet consisted of 10 war galleys, the primary warship in the Mediterranean for centuries. These were long, slender ships powered mainly by oars but also fitted with sails for long journeys. The Venetian galley was a highly specialized weapon, perfected in the arsenal. In the 15th century, many were still rowed by free citizens, well-trained professionals who knew what they were fighting for. A single galley crew was a small army of over 200 men, from oarsmen to marines armed with crossbows and swords. The command structure was professional and clear. Most importantly, Venetian galleys were starting to use a game-changing technology, gunpowder. Naval combat was still mostly about ramming and boarding, but cannons were changing the math. Venetian galleys had several cannons mounted in the bow, all firing forward. The biggest was the Canone di Corsia, a heavy centerline gun designed to smash hulls and/or banks from a distance. These early naval guns were slow and inaccurate, but they gave the Venetians a serious technological edge. Facing Loredan was the new Ottoman fleet at Gallipoli. They had more ships, about 32 galleys and smaller galleots. But this numerical advantage hid some serious weaknesses. The Ottoman navy was still learning the ropes. They had skilled sailors, many of them Greeks from the Aegean coast, but their command structure and tactics weren't nearly as developed as Venice's. Many of the Christian sailors in the Ottoman fleet were mercenaries, and their loyalty was questionable. Ottoman naval strategy was basically their land strategy on water: overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers and aggressive boarding actions. They wanted to turn a sea battle into a floating land battle, where their superior manpower would win the day. Their ships were tough, but they likely didn't have as much artillery as the Venetians. Their goal was to close the distance, suppress the enemy with a storm of arrows, and then win with swords and muscle. This was more than a battle between two navies, it was a clash between two philosophies of war: Venice's disciplined tactics and technology versus the Ottoman focus on shock and awe. In late May 1416, Pietro Loredan's 10 galleys arrived in the Dardanelles. According to the detailed letter he wrote to the Venetian Senate after the battle, he was careful to appear peaceful as his fleet approached Gallipoli on May 27. After all, his mission was officially diplomatic. But the Ottomans weren't interested in talking. As the Venetian ships got closer, Ottoman troops on the shore started shooting arrows at them. Almost at the same time, the Ottoman ships in the harbor opened up with their cannons. This was not a subtle message. There would be no negotiations. The Ottoman response was so hostile that Loredan had to pull his ships back to avoid taking fire from both the shore and the enemy fleet. The first day ended in a standoff. The next day, May 28, the two fleets cautiously sized each other up just outside the harbor. The wind wasn't cooperating for either side, and the day ended again, without a real fight. Despite the cannon fire, Loredan made one last attempt at diplomacy that evening. He sent a messenger ashore to complain about the unprovoked attack and to say, again, that he just wanted to land his ambassadors. The Ottoman authorities sent back assurances, claiming they would welcome the envoys. Trusting them, at dawn on May 29, 1416, Loredan prepared to approach the city again. He ordered his ships forward to take on fresh water. But the Ottoman promises were a lie. As the Venetians got close, the entire Ottoman fleet, 32 ships, sailed out in battle formation. One of the lead Ottoman galleys fired its cannons, and any hope for peace was shattered. The moment of truth was here. Loredan, having tried and failed at diplomacy, prepared his 10 galleys for battle against a force more than 3 times their size. The battle began with a smart Venetian move. Facing a much larger enemy, Loredan's priority was to control the fight. He couldn't let his fleet get swarmed. He ordered his ships to feign a retreat, slowly rowing backward while firing at the pursuing Ottoman fleet. The plan was to lure the Ottomans away from the safety of their shore cannons and to get the morning sun at his back, blinding the enemy captains. The Ottoman galleys, hungry for a fight, took the bait. They raised their sails for extra speed, which gave them momentum but also made them less maneuverable. During this chaos, one Venetian galley, commanded by Girolamo Minato, fell behind and was nearly cut off. Loredan had to act fast. He ordered his own fleet to raise sail, not to run, but to gain enough speed to reform his line and protect the vulnerable ship. Once his line was secure and the Ottomans were far out in open water, Loredan sprang the trap. The Venetian galleys lowered their sails, the oarsmen dug in, and the 10 warships turned as one to face the charging Ottoman fleet head-on. Loredan, leading from his flagship, surged forward and attacked the lead Ottoman galley. What followed was a brutal, swirling melee that lasted for hours. The crew of the Ottoman flagship fought back fiercely. As Loredan's galley grappled it, other Ottoman ships swarmed in, peppering his crew with volley after volley of arrows. This is where Venetian technology made all the difference. To counter the deadly arrow storms that were an Ottoman specialty, the Venetians had erected Pavises, large wooden shields along the sides of the galleys. This simple but brilliant defense protected the oarsmen and marines, allowing them to keep fighting and maneuvering even under heavy fire. While the Pavises neutralized the arrows, the Venetian gunners got to work. Their bow cannons, though slow to reload, were devastating at close range, smashing into the packed decks of the Ottoman ships. The Venetian galleys were stable gun platforms, while the Ottoman ships were designed mostly to carry troops for boarding. Loredan led by example, even after being wounded in the face and hand by arrows. He directed his ships to support each other, focusing their fire. The turning point came when a concentrated Venetian assault killed the Ottoman Admiral, Çali Bey. With their commander dead, the Ottoman command structure fell apart. Panic spread, and their attack dissolved into a desperate retreat. The Venetian victory was now a rout. Loredan pressed his advantage, pursuing the fleeing Ottoman ships and capturing them one by one. The battle, which began at dawn, did not end until late afternoon. The Ottoman losses were catastrophic. The Venetian fleet captured somewhere between 12 and 27 of their 32 ships. The Ottoman admiral was dead, and thousands of his men were killed or captured. The Venetians took around 1,100 prisoners. Their justice was swift and brutal. Any Christians found voluntarily serving in the Ottoman fleet were considered traitors and hanged from the yardarms. Several experienced captains were reportedly executed to ensure the Ottoman navy couldn't be quickly rebuilt. In stark contrast, according to Loredan's report, Venetian losses were remarkably light, with only 12 men killed and 340 wounded. It was a crushing victory against a much larger force. In the immediate aftermath, Loredan's victorious but battered fleet sailed to the nearby island of Tenedos to rest and treat their wounded. The message sent back to Venice was one of absolute triumph. Pietro Loredan hadn't just defended Venetian honor, he had annihilated the Ottoman fleet. The Battle of Gallipoli on May 29, 1416, was the first major naval showdown between the two powers, and it ended in a stunningly one-sided Venetian victory. The most immediate result was the clear message it sent. Venice had decisively asserted its dominance in the Aegean. The Ottoman navy was, for a while, completely broken. The destruction of their fleet and the execution of their best men bought Venice several decades of relative security for its trade routes. However, the victory also created a dangerous sense of complacency. The seemingly effortless way they had crushed the Ottoman fleet confirmed to the Venetians that they were simply better at naval warfare. This belief, while justified in 1416, would become a strategic problem down the road. They grew overconfident, assuming their technological and tactical edge was permanent. Interestingly, the crushing military victory didn't immediately lead to a political one. Despite Loredan's success, diplomatic squabbles dragged on for another 3 years. A peace treaty was finally signed in November 1419, with the Ottomans officially recognizing Venice's overseas territories. For Pietro Loredan, the victory made him a hero of the Republic, and he would go on to hold some of Venice's highest offices. But the true legacy of his victory wasn't the temporary peace it bought, but the long and bloody rivalry it kicked into high gear. The Battle of Gallipoli wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. It was the opening shot in a naval war between Venice and the Ottoman Empire that would define the Mediterranean for the next 2 centuries. The crushing defeat was a brutal but valuable lesson for the Ottomans, and they learned it with incredible speed. The battle showed them that numbers and aggression were no match for superior technology and disciplined tactics. Being a pragmatic and adaptable military power, the Ottomans took this lesson to heart. The defeat sparked a massive Ottoman investment in their navy. Later in the 15th century, Sultan Mehmed II, the man who would conquer Constantinople, launched a huge naval reform program. He built new shipyards and, most importantly, started building ships with heavy artillery that could compete with the Venetians on their own terms. The humiliation of 1416 directly fueled the creation of a modern Ottoman navy that would soon rival, and eventually surpass, Venice's. The next big conflict, the First Ottoman-Venetian War, 1463 to 1479, showed how much things had changed. Venice found itself facing a much tougher naval opponent. The war ended with the Treaty of Constantinople in 1479, which was a blow to Venice, forcing them to give up key territories and accept the Ottomans as a permanent power in the Aegean. The era of unchallenged Venetian sea power was officially over. The tide kept turning. In the next war, the Ottomans captured vital Venetian ports in Greece. But the real turning point came in 1538 at the Battle of Preveza. There, the Ottoman fleet, under the legendary Admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa, decisively defeated a combined Christian fleet. This victory cemented Ottoman naval dominance in the eastern Mediterranean for a generation. The student had officially surpassed the master. Even the most famous naval battle of the age, the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, has to be seen in this light. At Lepanto, another Christian Holy League, with a huge Venetian contingent, won a spectacular victory, wiping out the Ottoman fleet. But its strategic impact was limited. An Ottoman Grand Vizier is said to have told a Venetian diplomat, "In defeating our fleet, you have merely shaved our beard. A shaved beard grows back stronger. But in taking Cyprus from you, we have cut off your arm. An arm does not grow back." He was right. Despite the victory at Lepanto, Venice was forced to give up the island of Cyprus, a devastating loss. The decline continued with the long and ruinous Cretan War in the mid-17th century, which cost Venice the island of Crete after a 24-year siege. By the end of these wars, the Republic of Venice was a shadow of its former self. Its maritime empire was gone, its trade monopolies broken, and its role as the top naval power in the Mediterranean was a distant memory. The story of the 1416 Battle of Gallipoli is more than just an account of a single naval victory. It's a snapshot of a much larger historical drama. On that day, the Venetian Republic, with its better technology, training and tactics, proved that a smaller, smarter force could beat a larger one. Pietro Loredan's victory was a masterclass in naval warfare. But history is a tough teacher. The battle's true importance isn't in the years of peace it bought Venice, but in the centuries of war it foreshadowed. It was a violent wake-up call for the Ottoman Empire, forcing them to master sea power and kicking off a naval arms race that Venice would ultimately lose. The effortless trouncing of the Ottoman fleet in 1416 bred a Venetian overconfidence that blinded them to just how fast their rival was learning. The journey from the triumphant Venetian galleys at Gallipoli in 1416 to the loss of Cyprus and Crete centuries later is a story of how power shifts, how empires adapt, and how the lessons you learn in defeat can be far more valuable than the glory you win in victory. The clash in the Dardanelles was just the first act in a long and bloody struggle that would forever change the balance of power on the world's most contested sea. If you enjoy these deep dives into the tactics, technology, and context of military history, be sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to be notified of our future videos. We want to continue bringing these pivotal but often forgotten battles to life. Thank you for watching.